My name is Elena Ward, and I turned 32 last month. Most people would describe me as even-tempered someone who doesn't raise her voice, doesn't make scenes, keeps her world neat and private. I've learned that being calm disarms people, though sometimes it only makes them think you have nothing worth defending. 3 days before my mother's 60th birthday, I took the ferry from Seattle to Bainbridge Island with a gift in my tote bag, a first-edition poetry book I'd spent weeks tracking down. It was the kind of thing Mom used to love before dinner parties and charity luncheons replaced quiet reading. When I stepped into my parents' kitchen, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and restraint. My father, Thomas, stood near the counter, arms folded. My brother, Grant, leaned against the doorway in his tailored coat, scrolling through emails like a man too busy for small talk. Mom sat at the table, smiling the way people do when they wish they were anywhere else. "Elena," my father said, "we need to talk about Saturday." I smiled. "The party, I'll be there around 7. Grant set down his phone. "That's the thing, we think it's better if you skip this one." For a second, I thought he was joking. Then Dad nodded. "You know how these events are. Appearances matter." Grant's voice sharpened. "You still rent. You drive that old Subaru. You work from home doing what is it exactly freelance computer stuff people will ask questions we don't want to answer." Mom looked down at her hands. She didn't say a word. I tried to keep my voice steady. "So, I'd ruin the party. Don't make this dramatic," Dad said, but his tone made it final. I placed the wrapped book on the counter. "Then give her this for me." The ferry back to Seattle was half empty, the winter sky low and colorless. I stood on the deck, wind biting my face, and watched the island fade behind me. Inside my coat pocket, my phone buzzed with unread emails messages that had nothing to do with family, but everything to do with the deal I was about to close. They thought I had nothing to show. In 3 days, the world would prove otherwise. 6 years earlier, I was sitting in a cubicle surrounded by gray walls and the low hum of fluorescent lights when I realized I couldn't stay there another day. The company sold digital solutions, though no one could explain what that meant. My ideas sat buried in inboxes. My manager called me reliable, like it was both a compliment and a cage. By Friday, I'd written my resignation letter and handed in my badge before I could talk myself out of it. The following Monday, I woke up in my tiny Belltown apartment with no plan except a single line scribbled in my notebook: "Build something that makes sense." I dragged my old laptop to the kitchen table, opened a blank document, and began sketching the framework for a data platform that would make analytics usable for smaller companies, the kind that couldn't afford the massive systems built for giants. Those first months blurred into one long stretch of caffeine and noise. I coded until dawn, ate ramen 3 nights in a row, and watched my savings dissolve like sugar in coffee. The credit cards followed. There were days I'd walk down to Pike Place just to remind myself the world was still moving outside my apartment walls. Mom called every week, her voice light and polite. "Met anyone interesting lately?" she'd ask. "Never. How's your work going?" I'd start to explain my project, the prototype, the early traction, but the pause on the other end told me she wasn't listening. Eventually, I stopped trying. Around that time, I met Alex Nguyen, a developer I'd crossed paths with at a local tech meetup. He was quiet, sharp, and relentless in the best way. When I showed him my prototype, he saw potential instead of risk. We became partners not romantically, but in the kind of alliance forged by equal hunger. While my friends posted engagements and vacations, I built algorithms. When my family shared photos from charity galas, I debugged code through the night. Nobody noticed, and I told myself that was fine. Progress, I learned, doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like a single lamp burning at 3 a.m., and the stubborn heartbeat of someone who refuses to give up. 2 years after quitting my job, the name Northloop Analytics finally appeared on the contract header of a real client, a regional logistics company that needed a better way to track shipments across multiple states. When I signed the deal, the printer jammed twice, and Alex joked that even the machine didn't believe it was happening. We laughed until the tension broke, then stared at the paper like it might dissolve if we blinked. That contract changed everything. Within months, 2 part-time contractors became full-time employees. Then came 3 more. We rented a small office downtown, barely bigger than a storage room, but it had windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. I bought a coffee maker that cost more than my couch and told myself it was an investment in morale. Alex was relentless in his belief. Whenever I doubted myself, he'd say, "You built something people actually need. Lena, that's rare." He was the first person to call me that Lena, as if success required a name with sharper edges. Growth came fast and messy. We pushed updates from coffee shops, signed clients across time zones, and learned the art of pretending to know what we were doing until we actually did. By year 3, we doubled our contracts and started attracting attention from bigger firms. But at home, none of that seemed to matter. During Christmas dinner, Grant raised his glass to celebrate making senior partner at his law firm. My parents glowed with pride, their smiles polished and easy. When Mom turned to me, she said, "Still working on that computer thing." Her tone was gentle, but it landed like a pin through fabric, quiet, final, impossible to remove. I nodded and smiled, just like always. But that night, while everyone else watched the snow fall outside the dining room window, I slipped away to check my phone. A new client inquiry had arrived in my inbox, one that could triple our revenue. I stared at the screen, the reflection of Christmas lights flickering across the glass, and realized I didn't need their applause. I only needed momentum. 7 years after that first contract, North Loop Analytics had grown into something neither Alex nor I could have predicted. Our name began appearing on industry panels, mid-market forums, and quiet recommendation lists shared among CFOs who wanted enterprise-level tools without enterprise-level chaos. We had offices in 3 cities, a staff of 40, and a product roadmap that actually scared our competitors. The first email from Tech Venture Global arrived on a gray Monday morning. Subject line exploratory discussion. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. By noon, their VP of Acquisitions was on a video call, saying words that didn't feel real. "We're interested in bringing Northloop under our umbrella," he said. A full acquisition, not a partnership. The number he mentioned next, $340 million, was the kind of figure you read in headlines about other people's lives. I kept my face still. "We'd need to review the structure," I said, buying time. My voice sounded calm, professional, nothing like the chaos rushing through my veins. That night, Alex and I sat in our office long after everyone had gone home. Empty coffee cups lined the desk like trophies from old battles. "We did it," he whispered, almost to himself. "You did it." What followed was 6 relentless weeks of due diligence, valuation reviews, legal drafts, and board meetings. Every spreadsheet, every bug, every old NDA was turned inside out by lawyers in expensive suits. Still, we held our ground. I owned 52% of the company. Alex had 20%. The rest belonged to early employees and a small seed investor who once bet on me when I had nothing but code and conviction. By the time the final contract was ready, the date on the header made me pause. Friday, June 12th. My mother's 60th birthday party was scheduled for the very next evening. Alex caught my expression. Problem. I shook my head. No, just timing. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same week, my family decided I didn't belong in their world. The world I'd built decided I was worth hundreds of millions. When the deal closed, they'd finally see what those quiet years had become. Not because I needed them to, but because truth has a way of showing up uninvited. The signing took place on a Friday afternoon in a glass-walled conference room 30 stories above downtown Seattle. From up there, the city looked like a circuit board silver, sharp, alive. The table was lined with legal pads, contracts stacked in neat towers, and a single bottle of chilled champagne waiting at the far end. When the final signature hit the last page, the room filled with polite applause. Cameras flashed, hands shook, and someone from Tech Venture Global handed me a fountain pen engraved with my initials. I smiled for the photos, said all the right words, and accepted every congratulations as though I wasn't counting the seconds until I could leave. Alex raised his glass toward me. "You did it, Lena." "We did it," I corrected, and meant it. The champagne tasted metallic. I set the glass down and excused myself before the speeches began. By the time I reached the elevator, the buzz of celebration was already muffled behind steel doors. Outside, the early summer air smelled faintly of rain. I walked the few blocks to my building, a sleek high-rise overlooking the sound one I had quietly purchased 3 years earlier through my company's LLC. My parents thought I rented. They never asked to see where I lived. The penthouse was still and bright when I stepped inside. I kicked off my heels, loosened my hair, and placed the signed contract on the counter beside my unopened laptop. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the city far below. On the coffee table sat the gift I'd bought for my mother, the first edition poetry book, still wrapped in cream paper and tied with gold ribbon. I picked it up, traced the corner of the bow, then set it down again. The press release was scheduled for 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, right in the middle of her party, the one I'd been told not to attend. I hadn't planned it that way, but I couldn't imagine better timing. As I turned off the lights and looked out across the water, the skyline shimmered like a secret finally ready to speak for itself. The Bainbridge Country Club had never looked so polished. Gold linens shimmered under chandeliers, and a jazz trio played something soft enough to make the guests feel expensive. My mother's 60th birthday was in full swing laughter, champagne, practiced smiles. She wore a silver gown and the look of someone determined to keep every detail under control. At 5:30 the speeches began. My father stood near the bar, shaking hands with business partners, his voice carrying that confident warmth he reserved for people who mattered. Grant hovered close, introducing his fiancée to every senior partner from his law firm. From a distance, they looked perfect in image, smoothed by money, effort, and fear of cracks. And then, at 6:01, one appeared. The television above the bar, usually tuned to golf or muted stock updates, switched to the local evening news. The anchor's voice cut through the music. Breaking tonight, Seattle-based entrepreneur Elena Ward has sold her data analytics firm, Northloop, to Tech Venture Global for a reported $340 million. The room stilled. Forks clinked against plates, then stopped entirely. The screen showed my photo, the same professional headshot I'd taken years ago in a rented studio. Beneath it, my name scrolled in bold, "Local founder secures one of the state's largest private tech acquisitions." My father froze mid-conversation, the smile on his face draining before he could replace it with another. My mother's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, champagne pooling at her feet. A few guests gasped. Someone turned down the music. Across the table, Grant muttered, "We didn't know." Phones appeared like reflexes screens, lighting up with the same headline, the same image. Whispers rolled through the crowd, quiet but relentless, spreading from cluster to cluster until every eye found my family. Mrs. Whitmore, one of my mother's oldest friends, leaned in with a too-sweet smile. "Carol, you never told us your daughter was such a success story." My mother swallowed hard, color draining from her cheeks. My father reached for a napkin, missing the point entirely. In that elegant, glittering room, all the stories they'd told about me lazy, lost, unfinished, cracked open at once, and no one knew how to pick up the pieces. The first call came at 6:20. My phone buzzed across the counter, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring out. A minute later, my father's name appeared, then Grant's. By the third round, I knew they weren't going to stop. I answered on the fourth ring. "Elena," my father said, his voice too calm to be real. "You need to come here. Right now." "Why everyone's talking about the news," he said. "You've got to explain this. People are asking questions. We look." He hesitated. "We look ridiculous." I took a slow breath, watching the rain slide down the window. "You told me I didn't belong there. Remember, I'm just honoring your request." In the background, I heard murmurs, glass clinking, the rustle of a crowd pretending not to listen. "Don't be stubborn," he said sharply. "It's not what we meant." Grant's voice broke through next, tight with frustration. "Lena, this is insane. Things are different now." I almost laughed. "Right, because now I'm worth something you can brag about." "That's not fair," my father said. "No," I said softly. "It's just true." For a long moment, no one spoke. I could hear my mother's voice somewhere behind them, shaky, pleading. "Please, sweetheart, come, let them see you." "You've made us so proud." The words landed like glass tapping a table fragile, rehearsed. Pride had never been the problem. Visibility had. "I'm not coming," I said. "Enjoy your party." "Elena, wait," Grant started, but I was already ending the call. The apartment fell quiet again. I placed the phone face down on the counter, opened the cabinet, and reached for the chamomile tea I always saved for nights I needed calm. The kettle hissed softly as it boiled. When I finally sat by the window, mug in hand, the lights from Bainbridge shimmered faintly across the water. Somewhere out there, the party went on. But here, in the stillness of my own making, I finally felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. An hour after I hung up, my phone rang again, this time from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Ms. Ward, this is Rachel Lynn from Channel 7. We just covered your company's acquisition, and the response has been incredible. Our viewers are asking for more. Would you be willing to join us for a short segment tonight?" Her voice was warm but quick, the way journalists sound when they're already chasing the next headline. I hesitated, staring at the soft steam rising from my tea. My instinct was to stay quiet, disappear into the calm I'd earned. But another part of me, the one that had spent years being told to shrink, whispered yes. "Sure," I said. "I can be there in 30 minutes. The studio sat across the water, lit up like a stage against the dark Seattle skyline. Rachel greeted me at the door, bright-eyed, holding a clipboard. "We'll keep it conversational," she promised. "Just talk about what inspired you." Under the studio lights, everything felt both intimate and unreal. The host asked about the early days, the sacrifices, what it meant to build something from scratch. I spoke about perseverance, about failure not being a full stop but a comma. I mentioned women in tech, and how silence can be a kind of armor until it turns into strength. I didn't mention my family. When the cameras stopped rolling, the crew applauded softly. Rachel smiled. "That was beautiful," she said. "You have no idea how many people will need to hear that." By the time I got home, the clip was already trending locally, shared by entrepreneurs, alumni networks, even a few reporters who called it the story of the year. My inbox overflowed with messages of congratulations. Across the Sound, in a ballroom full of wilted flowers and gossip, my family's friends whispered the question my father could never unhear. She built all that, and they uninvited her. No argument could have burned as quietly or as cleanly as that truth. 3 days after the interview aired, I woke to a voicemail from Grant. His voice carried that familiar mix of authority and resentment. "You could have warned us," he said. "You made us look foolish. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad's furious, and everyone keeps asking why we didn't know. You owe us at least an explanation." He paused, then added, quieter, "You embarrassed us." "Lena." I listened once, then deleted it. Some words don't deserve a replay. The following week, my Aunt Linda called. She'd always been the calm one, less polished than the rest of them, more human. "Sweetheart, your mom's been a mess," she said. "She can't sleep. Keeps saying she handled everything wrong." "I'm sure she believes that now," I replied. "When it's public." Linda didn't argue. "She's proud of you, Elena. She just doesn't know how to say it without sounding small." Her kindness softened something in me, though I didn't admit it. 2 weeks later, my mother called from Linda's phone. I answered before I could change my mind. Her voice came through fragile, almost breaking. I was so proud of the wrong things. She began, "I thought keeping up appearances mattered more than asking if you were happy. You didn't have a title I could brag about, so I assumed you weren't successful. I didn't see you. For a moment." I couldn't speak. All those years of quiet effort, all the swallowed explanations, came rushing back. "I didn't need you to see success," I said finally. "Just effort." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." The words hung there, thin, trembling, but real. After we hung up, I sat by the window for a long time, the city lights flickering across the bay. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a door you opened once. It was something quieter, like breathing, or the sound of waves you stop fighting and finally let move through you. By late autumn, the noise had faded. The interviews stopped, the headlines quieted, and I found a rhythm again. Most mornings I took the ferry across the bay to a co-working space in South Lake Union, where I spent my time mentoring women who were building what I once dreamed of. Some had prototypes scrawled on napkins, others came with burnouts hidden under fresh ambition. I recognized the hunger in their eyes, the same one that used to keep me awake at 3 in the morning. They called me Elena in the same tone my old colleagues once used for people they'd only read about. I tried to keep things simple: advice about product market fit, funding, self-doubt. Mostly, I reminded them that they were allowed to take up space before success gave them permission. One gray afternoon, while I was wrapping up a meeting, the receptionist called. "There's someone here asking for you," she said. "He says he's your father." Thomas Ward looked smaller than I remembered. The sharp edges of his authority had softened. In his hand was a small velvet box. "This was your mother's," he said, opening it to reveal the thin silver watch she used to wear when I was a kid. "She wanted you to have it. Said it's time she stopped keeping track of you and let you keep time for yourself." I gestured to the chair across from me. We shared coffee in paper cups. No apologies, no speeches. Just quiet acknowledgement, the kind that doesn't erase history but sits beside it. When he left, I stayed by the window, the city glowing gold through the rain. The watch felt cool against my wrist, steady. They told me not to show up, so I didn't. But that night, my success did. And standing there, with everything finally still, I realized peace doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives when you stop needing any